kill you.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to Zaku Talk. I am your host, Pastor Skeyhill. This season, G versus Wing, and that means my host is the glorious
Bob Scary.
Okay, yeah, I find the glory in that.
Well, I was thinking more in the way of somebody who is pompous and full of themselves. I'm glorious.
Glorious. This week, episode 31 of both those shows, but before we dive into that, Bob, how's your week been going?
Week's been going okay. For those who cannot see, as this is a vocal podcast, no visuals here, I have bleached my hair so that I can mess around with different colors. I am picking up some stuff to start doing some simple cosplay foam work as well as some practical effect work. I am finally finished with my interview for the Tamashi documentary. So I was up until 6 a.m. Getting it finally recorded and mixed down and everything else. And I am definitely doing well enough on my end. How about you, Skeyhill?
Not too much exciting over here. Putting together an EPK. This is an electronic press kit for some festival stuff I'm working on for the film I shot in the spring. Doing more animation stuff, no real highlights there. The screenplay is now, I think, in order, but now I've got to get all the little scenes that have been rearranged to kind of mesh and gel a little better together. And then planning some rehearsals for the pilot. Hopefully someday we will get to look at that soon. That's what's going on with me this week.
Cool.
So with that out of the way, Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit about episode 31 of G Gundam?
G Gundam episode 31, Dazzling Power of the Clown. Get Mad, Gundam Maxter, or in Japanese, Pierrot no Genwaku, Okore Gundam Maxta. So for the etymology here, Japanese word for clown is Pierrot, which might sound familiar. It's like the name Pierrot, a famous clown name. Genwaku is the word illusion here. So the literal translation of the first half of the title is the clown's illusion. And illusion, for all you Naruto fans and what have you out there, if you know the term genjutsu, that is the art of subterfuge, of illusions, of lies. So the gen prefix here would connotate that.
Well, so this Pierrot is very interesting. Does that imply that this is like a loan word they have borrowed from France?
I feel like it is. I didn't have enough time to go into the historical context in my research, but as I understand it, Pierrot was the name of a famous clown in France. I think it was even a mime because they like to use clowns and mimes in very similar fashions. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's where they got that word, because the Western clown is not quite the same thing as some of the caricatures that they've used in their theater up until that point.
Is it common for Japan to borrow from French?
I don't know specifically if it's common enough to take from France alone. As I understand it, there are a number of words from Western cultures that they ended up having to take as loan words much further back than just the recent past century in order to be able to have a way to translate these concepts between each other that are strictly of foreign nature. It's no different than the fact that we use the term sushi in America instead of just saying fish on rice or something to the effect.
Yeah.
It's, if there's already a word for it from another culture and there's really no direct consideration for it that makes enough sense, just use the word or pick out a word that sounds close enough.
Mm-hmm.
But etymology aside, How about I go into the description? Chippy lost his mother to a group of terrorist clowns and since then has been afraid of them. When his next opponent is Jester Gundam, who copies everyone's moves, it looks like Chippy will lose fairly quickly. However, with a son from his mother, sung by his crew, he defeats the mad clown.
Yeah, that is what happened there.
Very short and succinct compared to what actually happens throughout the episode.
I know. This is one of our shorter descriptions.
Absolutely. But what about the description for this episode of Gundam Wing?
Well, over here we have the Glass Kingdom, or in the Japanese, Garasu no Okoku Sanku Kingu Domu.
Yeah, kingdom. It's literally just kingdom, but they're doing the phonetics for those who would check it out. I'm just quickly racking my brain here. Yep. So Okoku is the word for kingdom, right? So Garasu is just, in this case, the loan word for glass. Mm-hmm. So the kingdom of glass kingdom.
Makes sense.
And I noticed that they only use the glass kingdom in the English titling, even though the Japanese includes Sanku Kingdom. So the full title would be the Glass Sanku Kingdom, would probably be the most concise way of saying it, because they are frail. They are beautiful and they are idealized, but they are frail in the course of this episode.
So the Japanese characters only have the word kingdom once?
Yeah, I'm combining Okoku and kingdom here because they're qualifying Sanku Kingdom with the title.
Okay. I guess then I would be like Sank Kingdom, the Glass Kingdom, in my mind.
Yeah, that would be another good way to go about it, but they were probably trying to just make it sound more epic and grandiose.
Yeah, the Glass Kingdom, pretty fine here. I do find it interesting that one language only wanted a part of the title.
Yeah, that's the way of it.
While Hiro intends to take his Gundam and just leave, Catra is able to convince him to stay in the Sank Kingdom, at least for a little bit, and defend Rolina. Later, when Oz attacks a Trey's faction unit hiding in the Sank Kingdom as an excuse to invade the pacifist nation, Hiro leads a counterattack with the Wing Gundam and saves Rolina's life in the process. Although she advocates pacifism, Rolina allows Hiro and Noin to form a small defense force of mobile suits to defend the country. That's what we've got going on there. Well, Bob, last week...
Wait. I have a question for you now.
Yeah.
Hiro led a counterattack. Where was Char Aznable?
Yes. Bob is referring to the 1988-89 movie, Char's Counterattack, that sort of originally had ended the original UC timeline for a bit. They have gone back and revisited it with Gundam Narrative and Gundam Unicorn, and will revisit it with Gundam Hathaway's Flash whenever that movie gets to be finished made. COVID has taken so much from us, Bob.
You know, you say that, but I'm actually looking forward to the fact that Hideaki Anno is still looking to put out 4.44 for the Evangelion line of films.
Yeah,
so.
Another movie horribly delayed by this pandemic. And annoyingly, not 4.44, 3.1 plus 1.0. I'm sorry.
Right, correct.
Just to be a little difficult on us.
I mean, listen, I have to appreciate that story crafter there, because sometimes you just have to put a middle finger up to everybody and they're going to eat it up. So
yeah, he seems to hate ending Evangelion. Every time he comes, he's just like, fuck you all.
This is not an Evangelion podcast, but to be fair, just to finish off before we get into G Gundam, my understanding is that the end of the original television series was due to his mental state at the time. And when people weren't happy enough with that, he had to give an alternate perspective of the ending because, it's too hard to understand, or, it's too happy for this sad show. So we get an awfully sad ending in the way of a film. And then years later, people are like, well, we want it updated. We want to have new graphics and, blah, 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 blah. So now he's putting out these things achingly slow and making a ridiculous amount of cash, I'm sure, from any of the royalties and whatnot from the sales of extraneous items. For those listeners out there, check out The Red Bard on YouTube. She has a wonderful video on, in a perfect timeline situation, you could have your entire day managed with Evangelion-based products.
Obviously, I'm joking. I actually like both Evangelion endings and have no complaints, though I love the idea of the way you phrased it, where these audiences are like, this ending's too happy. It is also too confusing. Give us a new ending. And he's like, oh, I'll give you a new ending. More confusion, more sadness. I love it. I love the ballsiness of it.
Absolutely. But we'll save some of this Evangelion stuff for when my wife and I eventually do our Evangelion cross Twin Peaks podcast. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow, she and I.
Okay.
Gundam Thoughts.
Yes. Last week, bitching and moaning that Argo Galsky's not getting his own episode. We finally this week get a pilot to have their own episode that's not Domon. We get to follow Maxter, and I regret it all. I wanted it, but I didn't want it like this. I didn't want weird clown show. Old man Patrick's coming back out for this episode. He was not pleased with Clown Gundam Fighter.
How dare you have fun in your giant robots?
Which is unfortunate, because there is something here with this backstory that Maxter has. There could be fertile ground here to do something with it. And they just wanted to throw a lot of clowns at us instead.
Yeah, well, I mean, Chippy Crockett up to this point has just had the very simplistic, I grew up on the streets, and then I told myself I'd grab victory by the balls with my hands. Like, they made it very clearly, like, aggressive American. They never gave him anything soft. So to show that not only does he have, at this point, a very fun kind of phobia that people were very into at this time, clowns, and then applying that to why he became an orphan. It wasn't necessarily that his mom is confirmed dead. He even says so, at least on my side, that he doesn't know but assumes with all the gunfire that she probably died during this. But he just went on just kicking it around in the streets. And we also confirmed that, no, he did not grow that little pink tuft on his own. That's a totally purposeful dye job.
Yes, he's very flashy. A good thing to come out of this episode is George also gets his ass handed to him, like my Russian friend. But you know what? I don't like him anyway, so fine.
So that's so weird. I always imagined you, at least in your youth, as being more of a George Jasand and less of being in line with Argo Galsky. I think that you are just aging at a rapid pace because I know your true form.
I think there just isn't enough there for me to grab on to anything. And at least, Maxter and what's his name? Chippy
Crockett. Yeah.
Sai Shi, as annoying as I find the latter. There's enough color there. And just George being like, I'm going to be elegant knight. It's not enough for me to hold on to. So if of these five, if there's one guy that I'm like, yeah, he can get the shaft, give it to Frenchie. That's fine.
Sure. I will say that I agree, as it's episode 31. Of the five of these characters, he has definitely developed the least. But it's also only episode 31 out of a 48 some odd episode series. So we still have a whole third of a series that might give us something. But I'm not making you hold your breath, and I'm certainly not holding mine.
Why is Portugal known for their clowns?
I think my interpretation is they're using Portugal in a way to sub in for Brazil or something so that we can have Carnival.
Okay, why not just have Brazil?
I feel like Portugal probably has some more context here that I'm missing. Again, I didn't deep dive on this episode because, as you noted, it's clowns and singing. I'm not going to go into a deep dive on what is the meaning for him to have a jester as his... No, we don't care right now. This is purely for spectacle.
If any of you listeners out there know the relationship of Portugal and clowns, please write into zakutalkcast@gmail.com.
You can certainly do that, although I will also let you kids know out there, I'm literally just going to Google it while we're talking.
Of course, Chippy is saved by 2 rousing renditions of America the Beautiful. Really gets him going. Really loves America that much, where it's all he needs.
America the Beautiful is what they sing on that side?
What do they sing on your side?
Oh, no, it's one of the insert songs.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know if you remember from when we first got back to Neo Hong Kong and they started having just a random song playing in the background or something.
No, I don't remember that. That was not the song. I guess they couldn't get the rights for it or something.
Yeah, no. So it's either that or they thought, oh, no, we got to make America really American. He's not allowed to have a real context here. He has sung a song that his mother sang for him when he was a child before she was inevitably taken from him.
Yeah.
And he tells Rain to sing that to him while they're hanging out in the bay. Yes. And then because Chippity's crew listened in on it, they then do a admittedly mediocre rendition of that same song together as a team.
Yeah.
And he refers to them as his mommies. There's a lot of mother stuff going on if you watch the Japanese episode that I don't know showed up in the American release.
I mean, they do talk about mommies a lot, and it is he does call his harem like his mommies. It is. Oh,
well, I say mommies because that's what they translate it in the subtitles for me as. But he does go mama because mama is treated as mommy. Colloquially over there.
Yes, the women for some reason have a really hard time figuring out how to sing to Chippy Crockett. At first, they're like, Rain, you're the only one who can sing for some reason. And then she's like, no, I can't. And then they're like, well, then what are we gonna do? And then, a minute later, they're like, well, I guess we can just sing, right? Because we all have voices and know the song.
I understand where you're going with that. I think it was just a poorly handled situation of them. Because Rain was the one to have sung it to him in the bay, and they talked her into talking on their behalf because they didn't want to be in his way and or get slapped. Like one of his members just literally gets slapped in the face in the tent when he comes out of his hypnosis. I am not one for violence against women, especially something so egregious as that. But at the same time, if somebody hits me in the face, I'm gonna be like, well, I mean, at least you have a reason. Can you? Because I'm not a person who fights.
Chippy obviously coming into anger seemingly out of nowhere. Domon has a similar reaction in the circus tent with the clown. And at the first, the clown's kind of like mimicking him. And so Domon's like, yeah, all right, you think you're clever. And then the clown mimics him some more, and he's like, now he's yelling in the face of the clown, and then jumps down. And you're like, well, Domon, at least some things haven't changed about you.
I may have found an answer.
All right, what have you got?
So it's not a direct translation or a direct relation quite yet, but apparently there's a beach in Portugal that hosts an annual clown parade that is thought to be the largest in the world.
The largest clown parade or the largest parade?
I'm trying to quickly skim through this here.
We can only hope there aren't multitudes of clown parades out there.
Okay, so they're saying it's the village hosts one of the largest clown congregations on the planet as part of its lively carnival celebrations. Carnival not being like but Carnival, a very well-known series of events that occurs in South America.
Well, it does have a strong. The Brazilians got it from their European roots, where Carnival was the time right before Lent, where you would eat lots of meat because you were about
why we have Mardi Gras.
Yeah, which is why you were about to fast from it, and so you would do all kinds of vice-like things because you weren't going to be able to do them for 40 days, and so it was a big party, and thus Carnival, carne meaning meat.
I honestly, even though I grew up Catholic and everything else, I never put two and two together that the point of Mardi Gras and all these other things was to flush yourself of sin so that way you can try to pretend you're saintly for 40 days. That's wild.
Yeah, you got to get out of your system,
That's really interesting. But yeah, so I mean, just looking at this on the quick, it appears that some 4,000 fright-wigged, squeaky-nosed participants make their way through the pretty town's cobbled streets. So imagine going to a place like Anime Boston or something.
Yeah.
Circa 2006, our first year together.
Yeah.
at the thing. And just imagine that everyone, instead of being in anime cosplay or just, nerd shirts or whatever, they're all dressed as clowns, even if it's just a little bit of grease makeup on their face. They're all dressed as clowns.
Yeah, they're all actually juggalos. Fun fact. It's the world's largest
let's
ICP.
not get the juggalos in here with us because, one, people are going to misunderstand them, because, two, they're actually super capable. I appreciate them now in a way that I couldn't when I was younger, because the primary people in the Insane Clown Posse are very well-spoken artists that are extremely liberal and very forthright in their what do you call it? Their political stances on things, and it shows up in the art that they do.
About magnets.
Well, how do they work?
We don't know.
Fucking miracles.
Yeah. So we have the biggest gathering of ICP fans here in Brazil. So one of them has decided to fight in the Gundam fight and also work at the circus at the same time. He just really loves clowning around. And the Portuguese thought, yes, this is our man. I actually feel bad for this guy that he has to work while he's also fighting in these Gundam battles.
Well, I'm taking it from a place of he is one of those, I wouldn't say glory hog, but he's definitely more of an attention seeker.
Yeah.
And so when he can't get his go with doing all his clowning around inside a giant mecha, he is probably going to try and keep that high going for himself by being the primary event at a circus show. Typically, the clowns aren't the primary spectacle. So the fact that he is for that specific circus is kind of a thing.
And I like that when the Chippity's team want to go investigate their next opponent, they're like, well, he was in the Jester Gundam, so obviously he worked at a circus. But nobody was like, Sasaishi's in the Dragon Gundam, so obviously works at a Chinese restaurant. Though he actually does for a little bit.
Do they do that in the American?
Yeah. And that's how
literally they just say they researched him and that he works at this carnival.
We knew he was a Jester Gundam, so obviously the first place we look was at the circus. And so, yeah, he definitely works here. Yes. A little, yeah.
God damn you, America.
A God Gundam, obviously Domon works at a church, so we got to go there and investigate. Like, what? Why would you assume that he's working anywhere at all? Like, he seems to be the only one who's working.
They know the guy's name. They found out that he actually is working at this circus when trying to find out where he's about.
I see.
I think he's even advertising it, but it's not like, I'm the windmill Gundam, so I must work over at a wind farm.
Crush wheat with a fan. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a fan salesman.
Would you like some ACs?
No. So what's interesting to me, and I don't know if they do it on your side.
Yeah.
He tries to divert from having to do anything because he's too cool for school. And there's not really an inkling in the voice acting that he's actually afraid. And it takes until they're in the tent and really start seeing him screw with Domon for Chippy to start actually freaking out. So, but I will say that he telegraphs enough that he doesn't want to be there, not by showing fear, but just in general. I don't want to be here. This is uncomfortable for me. The fact that they keep pushing him to do it, kind of a dick move on all parties' account.
Yeah, the script and the director seem to indicate that was what their goal was like he doesn't want to go to the circus, and it's because he's hiding this fear. I wouldn't call it a dick move on their part, because at least in the English version, he's trying to play it off as cartoonishly and vocally as he can.
Okay, yeah, no, in the Japanese, he's just clearly like...
He's just I don't want to do this, because, and then, I don't know, like, I imagine him putting on shades, and he's just like, this is baby stuff. And they're like, no, have fun, you party pooper. You know, what they've been doing to Domon for episodes.
Clear as that on our side in Japan here, but yeah. I get where you're going.
So, like, it doesn't feel like a dick move, but I wish the American voice actor had put in some of that subtlety, because I think that would kind of help make it a nicer scene. And then, then he's sort of very frightened. And then has an all right moment where he tells his sad story to Rain, where his mother, where he is held hostage by what seemed to be a gang of Jokers from the Batman Beyond series.
Oh, I was going to say Joker kids from Joker, the movie that just came out.
Oh, yeah, that movie too. You know, ostensibly, there probably is a backstory there where they're like, we need to go into space, whatever, the Earth is falling apart, so we are desperate enough to take you hostage so we can have the shuttle. But all of that is lost because they're just sort of laughing maniacally all the time like weird, crazy clowns while they're firing guns wantonly in all directions. Yeah. So, you know, we lost some momentum there. But he tells this story and then tries to play that off to Rain, where he's just like, pretty silly story, isn't it? Don't worry about me.
At least over in Japan, we get to break through his BS, his toxic masculinity, and be like, no, it's okay. You're allowed to be afraid. It's okay.
And so Rain does that too. So this is a nice written moment there. Yeah. Is perfectly
Does
fine.
she, in the American, then hum America the Beautiful?
Sings it. Sings the whole thing.
She sings it while they're hanging out there?
So she sings it to him, and they're like in another room or something, like listening in. And Maxter's like, aha, or Chippity's like, I'll do it. And then, then he does the fight. Now... So the clown, you know, this seems to be a Sentai thing, right? Where your villains are like themed. And so he's a clown and he mimics fine. He's mimicking Chippity's style so he can literally fight against himself as he tries to overcome his past. The metaphor, very on the surface. What was interesting though was when he's mimicking French guy, like he seemed to produce extra matter so he could make bits of his own. I have no idea how he would be able to do that. I thought the bits were like part of his costume, but...
Yeah, well, I mean, considering that his bits are literally just themed like a bunch of clown noses or pom-poms or whatever, I wouldn't be surprised if they were stored somewhere in the balls. Because, I mean, if pee is stored in the balls, then balls have to be stored in the balls, so it's fine.
And then Chippity hears the song and powers up, breaks out of his bindings, and just one punch in the face, very strong punch, defeats his opponent, who apparently was wearing a mask the whole time. This could be a visual metaphor, but that's what happens there.
Yeah, so, again, on this side, it's more like... he hears the song of his mom, and that gives him the courage to fight against it. Same thing. I will also note, once again, we have a punch hitting a fighter in the face, even though they don't have the reactive stuff on their face.
Yeah.
They shouldn't anyway.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think the mask is going to be made up of that stuff and be able to just walk around with it. But I know, too, that... having masks is a very common thing for clowns or clown-like villains in these types of shows. The fact that the face does little to no moving is supposed to elicit that sort of fear, as opposed to just having some grease paint on.
That's the end of the episode. So, and as for all the problems I have with it, it's salvageable. Like if we went back and did this again, Bob, I wouldn't like shred it and come up with something new. I would keep all the chunks here and just renege them a little bit and finagle things around, and you could get something here. The seeds are there. We just got to tend to them well.
Sure. So I'm realizing that I haven't pointed this out yet either. Besides the fact that the mom's song is supposed to be about courage and being able to find it within yourself and everything like that, I think the reason why we got America the Beautiful instead is that a lot of the people who are doing the localization at this point don't want to incorporate any of the Japanese tracks. So rather than have to figure out how the hell are we going to translate this and turn it into a salvageable song, they just found something with a similar enough meter to just A to B that, so they don't have to do too many changes in lip flap or whatever. I think that if, in this, remake that we're talking about here, we either just let the audio go through and say, to hell with it, we know that they're supposed to be Japanese and this and that, just let it happen. Or we take the time well in advance, because this show is almost a decade. It's at least a half a decade old by the time we get it here in the States.
Yeah.
You have enough time to have known that the episode was coming. Write the damn song.
America the Beautiful fits a bit with the campy nature of the show already. If this is the direction you want to go, might as well lean into it, I guess.
If you're going to step away from some of the camp that is already involved here to try and make it a little more realistic, going away from the Lumber Gundam to be the Grizzly Gundam, away from Spike Gundam to be the Tequila Gundam to be the Spike Gundam, things like that, and take away some of these things that was already handed off to them. Don't incorporate half-assed campiness after the fact. That's my opinion.
Well, I think that we obviously know why they switched from Tequila Gundam.
I know, I'm using that for hyperbolic
but
purpose.
Like Lumber Gundam, I think you change because what kid wants to buy a Lumber Gundam toy when you could buy a Grizzly Gundam toy?
Well, that was what my argument was to you back when we were looking at this in episode 6.
Well, I'm buying into it now. I don't think they've leaned away from the campiness, quite frankly, and the voice actors in America certainly don't make me think they've leaned away from the campiness.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, those are my thoughts on some G Gundam here.
Okay, but so do we want to get into Gundam Wing? Were there any other thoughts before we just jump in that direction?
That's all I have on G Gundam.
The Glass Kingdom. I appreciate that there are a lot of subtle enough moments throughout this where if you are coming in on an episodic level, you can take it at face value and it's fine. If you've been watching since the beginning and you start understanding the characters' wants and needs, their motivations, it's interesting to see how there's some double play here and there, like how I think it's Noin talks about how we assume she's talking about Katra when saying that to the pair of them, you're such a kind boy, while Hero has been pissing his pants about why do we have to stay here? There's no reason to be here. And he's playing it off, but he's also saying in between the lines, the longer we stay here, the more damage we're going to cause for this place. And we can take it as Katra wanting to be this kind boy because he wants to be there and protect, as is the tradition, versus from the soldier perspective, Noin is also acknowledging that Hero is the kind boy, knowing that he's willing to give himself away and not have anybody close so that they can survive.
Yeah, what I like about this Hero Katra dynamic is Katra wants to stay to protect the Sand Kingdom and Hero wants to leave to protect the Sand Kingdom. And what is great about this show is that they're both right. And it wants us to think that. And so, Hero realizes we're just going to cause problems if we're here. We're also actively defying what Rolina wants, which Hero must appreciate on some level if he's willing to protect it by leaving. And there could also be an element you could read into based on other things that Hero wants to leave because Rolina brings something out of him he doesn't know what to do with.
Certainly.
It's the one thing that takes away his pragmatism is this relationship he has with Rolina, this weird thing that they have going on. And in the manga, he actually, because there's no Katra, Noin brings him down to be like, these are all the mobile suits we have here instead of Katra. And he specifically says, quite pragmatically, I'm not staying here because if the Sand Kingdom survives or doesn't, it doesn't matter. Either way, you'll have worldwide peace. It's just a matter of who's going to be in charge of it. And that is sort of something interesting to consider as Rolina now has to figure out, like, is fighting worth it? Is peace worth more? Like, what does a world of total pacifism look like, and who benefits from that structure?
Certainly. Well, I mean, I am willing to say that at least in terms of the show's context, we already have someone who is espousing the benefits of fighting, but is also doing it in a way that makes us feel like it's perverse even still. So there's definitely a message that they are leaning towards in the show that they are willing to let be a little more gray in the manga.
Yeah, and
because manga doesn't really tend to use color. Anyway,
it'll get more gray in the show before then it annoyingly doesn't. But, the manga can kind of be a little more explicit with Hiro being just like, listen, live or die, it doesn't matter, right? We're just sort of dictating who's in charge, and that's not sort of what a soldier's job is supposed to be. And so he just wants to leave to do what he's about to do later on. And so that was interesting. And then Rolina has this conversation at the end where she kind of still showing us she's growing because she has to relent in her position. Even though she still believes in it, she hasn't changed her mind that total pacifism is the way to go, but acknowledges that if she doesn't cooperate with the people in her kingdom, then she can't hope to be a beacon of cooperation for around the world. So she actually has to give in on something she strongly believes in.
Is that how they word it on your side?
That's, the gist of it.
Okay, well, I'm just making sure because on my side, she's talking specifically about both Noin and Hiro. She's not saying it as like, if I can't cooperate with my people. She's saying it, if I can't cooperate with the people I'm closest to, is what she says when the two of them agree about it. So
yeah, it is directed at Hiro and Noin, but it had the weight to me of like a metonymy where like they're, her people, right? Because they're in her camp. But like her people is this very small kingdom of pretty much citizens that just kind of go to this school.
Okay.
So to me, it's just like, we have to have one voice here or else we as a world can't have one voice. And so now it becomes a battle of like, how hard do you fight for principles? And when she has her conversation with the Romefeller people that like just sort of twist her words so that they have an excuse to fight the Trey's faction people and invade the Sen Kingdom, you see sort of like what the difficulties are when you try to govern based purely on ideology, where Hiro at the end is like, you got to build a defense force because he's like, if we don't have policy to kind of back these things up, then none of it sort of matters anyway, and they can be whatever they want for whoever needs it whenever they're in charge.
Yeah. Dorothy.
Yeah.
One, those eyebrows.
Those eyebrows. Every time. That's how you can tell her and Trey's are related.
Sure, but also I want to note that my wife had this great take.
Yeah.
She was looking at her and she thought that she looked like a bad human version of a Pokemon, and it took her a minute before she realized Delibird. For those over on the opposite side of our microphones here, Delibird is a delivery Pokemon and is meant to look sort of like Santa Claus. The top of his hair, top of its hair, because it's both gender, looks like giant bushy eyebrows. It's awful, but her eyebrows are very similar.
Yeah, I wonder, maybe Delibird is a bad bird version of Dorothy. Maybe that creator of that Pokemon was just like, I love Mobile Suit Gundam Wing. And he's just seeding all the characters.
The little fork into his eyebrows. Damn it.
Yes, and I love it particularly. There'll be times when she like plays with her eyebrows. She's got a finger stroking them. It doesn't happen often, but it definitely stands out in my mind because it's such a weird thing to see and draw attention to.
I want to be clear too. Like, yeah, we're picking on a person for their eyebrows, but like, fucking watch FLCL and tell me that the guy with nori strips for eyebrows is any different.
Well, and like they're just such preposterous anime eyebrows. It's okay to make fun of them because it's such an anime thing.
Sure. But the thing I did want to talk about is I am really curious where she's going with her egging on of Hiro. Obviously, she did hit a nerve somewhere in there during their fencing. Yes. I was going to say rapier battle.
Yeah.
Fencing. Yeah. Hey. That's what 6 hours of weird sleep do to you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I am curious what it is she is trying to allude to involving Hiro Yui. And the fact that we had that weird moment as he's introducing himself to the class where he has to think for a second, do I introduce myself as Hiro Yui? Like that's not my name, but I guess I'm already put into the system as Hiro Yui. How do I go about that? Okay, fine. The fact that all that must be going on in his head besides the cutscene we get of, I want you to take on the code name of the person who was trying to bring about peace in space. Before we get him to just say his name, I want to know what is occurring between that moment and what is happening with Dorothy. Is that something that we're going to see sooner, later, or not at all?
Yeah, what I will say is watching these last couple episodes with her, this runtime through, it finally dawned on me how similar Dorothy actually is to Rolina. And sort of the way they kind of go about things and the way that they're perceiving the world. Like it.
Yeah, she's her shadow, her mirror image.
Yeah, but like it's that I always knew, but just sort of like what that implied for their, 15-year-old selves and how that can sort of manifest each other and how they can kind of keep mirroring each other in more subtle ways than I had sort of picked up on the earlier run-throughs was sort of interesting. And I'll delve into that a bit more, but now's not yet the right time.
Okay, I trust you in that. I appreciate that the Trey's faction, Oz, was more than willing to give up their lives to erase any visibility of them having existed there so that the Sand Kingdom could actually operate as intended. That is one of those sacrifices that you really have to give acknowledgement to be able to willingly say, my life is not as great as the lives of people who are going to be burdened because I exist. It's not my favorite way of looking at it. It's incredibly depressing, but it's something worth admiring to a degree.
Yeah, we're seeing in the Trey's faction, what we've kind of seen in Trey's on the surface and subtly is like this idea of a bigger picture. They trying to carry out Trey's will or have a firm eye on the bigger picture and acknowledge sort of how important the Sand Kingdom will be for the future of humanity. And it gives us sort of two very troublesome things for Rolina to have to deal with, and for us as people who presumably would also like a world without violence. The first one we've talked about is, all right, does Rolina have to take up arms in her kingdom to protect these ideas that she holds so dear, despite the hypocrisy of it? And then two, how many lives are worth sacrificing to protect that ideal? Because that's what comes up with this Trey's faction. Can these 8 soldiers die and you still can boldly pronounce this lofty goal of total peace? And what would make that sacrifice worth it? And that's sort of an interesting thing to have to tackle as we kind of want to build this world that the show is trying to portray to us.
Yeah, no, I absolutely appreciate all that. I'm also curious. I wonder what was going through Rolina's head when it came to her finding out this very short-lived secret of Noin being her shadowy self of trying to manage the parts that will make Rolina look bad if people were to see her doing them proactively. The gathering of these, what were these, the Taurus suits?
Yeah, these are the Taurus suits. Mm-hmm. But they've been modified for land combat, so they are agile because they were originally designed for space, so they're like the Ares.
Yeah, so we have these White Knight Ares style Taurus being used as defenders of this Sank Kingdom, and we're getting a lot of this. I'm willing to say good guy King Arthur Camelot visual going on between that, and the fact that this show's happening around the same time as Scaflone is happening, like there's a lot of this fantasy in science future fiction vibe that I get from this. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that's what is intended here, but to have these White Knight robots, because mobile suits, I guess.
Yeah.
To have them there standing as an effigy of the pure intentions of this kingdom that speaks of peace, it really does lend itself to that epic vibe.
You can even see in some of the costumes, right? They're sort of, especially with Noin in her Captain of the Guard uniform, they're kind of leaning into those Romerfeller frocks. And the second opening, you will kind of examine more of that kind of costuming as well.
That actually does bring up a question of mine. We are now at episode 31. Do I have to wait until episode 40 for this second opening, or?
I won't tell you when it comes up, but it is certainly, unfortunately, late because it's a pretty nice song and a pretty cool opening.
I swear to goodness, if this happens in like the final 3 episodes, that's going to be incredibly pointless, but I'll buy.
You just have to wait and see.
Yeah. So are there any other major points that you wanted to talk about? Because that's the long and short of it. It seemed like a very straightforward episode to me.
Yep. I mean, it's pretty much there. It's kind of asking us more questions as we in the second half kind of deals with like, what would a world with turtle pacifism be? What would it mean? Who would run it? And who benefits? And what would it take to get there? And seeing Hero and Catra kind of react to it different ways. We get to see a lot more of Hero doing it. Catra sort of being our stand-in a little bit. But Catra will have his own reactions to it later on, and we'll just kind of keep following it from there. Yeah, pretty standard episode. But it's sort of like a flag-bearing episode too, which just like, this is what we're going to talk about for a little bit, guys. So pay attention. All
right, yeah, that makes sense. Do we want to go the way we go?
I think we can go the way we go. Where did you go this week, Bob?
Like sand through the hourglass, this is the way that we go.
Well, I think where I went was I appreciate what Gundam Wing has offered us so far. And there has been a major jump in my opinion of Hiro Yui from the first episode complaining about him being an android boy, possibly, to being this very realistic character now. I couldn't buy in on this being a real Robo series when we entered, because it seemed so bigger than life compared to what I was understanding the real Robo franchise was. So to see where we've gotten to at this point and still understand that while a bit of it is really out there compared to original Mobile Suit Gundam, etc., I appreciate the aesthetic. I appreciate the character development. I'm hoping that by series end, even if we are still having some grandiose visuals, the spectacle of it all, that I can buy in on the realities that they are trying to portray hidden underneath this veneer of pseudo fantasy and the like. But also, yeah, I mean, calling for hot younger women mommies and having them dote on me would be great too. What about you, Skeyhill?
I mean, I sort of agree with you there. Like,
which part, the mommies or?
Yeah, the mommies. I agree with you sort of on the reading of Hero and sort of the show in general, because, you know, those first couple episodes, 5 or 7 episodes are tough to kind of get through. And that's where a lot of people kind of stop and they're just like, nope, and they check out. Even if they keep watching it, they're not sort of engaged the same way you have to. But it is a show that sort of demands a little more of your attention because it wants to do what UC Gundams have done in the past and be Robo. But I also think, as I've talked about numerous times, it knows you're coming in with sort of anime tropes in mind and expectations, and it wants to play those against you. So it has to. And if I were to redo this, I don't know how much I would lean into it, because it does make your beginning a lot tougher to swallow for a lot of people, and that might just shoot yourself in the foot. But there is a goal in trying to set up expectations to demolish them, so that you have to kind of reckon with yourself and your preconceived notions, but also just makes you pay attention more, which is why people like twists so much. Because you're like, shit, wait, that's what's going on? And now you just assume you have to always pay attention or you'll miss something. Perhaps the problem with Gundam Wing is it takes too long for us to realize that, so that could be a way to tackle it. I'm not sure, so I do agree with you there. As for my way we go, I noticed like a difference in the color palettes of these two shows.
Yeah.
Kind of going off of a little bit what you said here, is that, you know, the realistic Robo-ish show Gundam Wing is a lot more muted-ish. There are the colorful designs for the mechs, but overall they wanted to kind of keep it sort of a little lower down, not overly saturated. You know, whereas, especially in this episode with the clowns, G Gundam likes just its colors. At the arcade, it's colors everywhere, primary colors especially. It's largely primary colors, and I think part of that, maybe what it's going for in its audience. Now, I imagine, though, when you're pitching this show to Sunrise or Bandai, you've sort of being like, this is our demographic, but I don't know, if G Gundam wants to lean in more to these brighter, flashier primary colors, that indicates to me it probably skews a little younger than what Gundam Wing would. But that would sort of make sense for the content that they're tackling and the means that they're tackling them for.
Okay. I mean, we've been going for a while. Do we want to take a stop and sit at the Nerd Corner?
I do think we need to take a break. So let us take one at the Nerd Corner.
Let's take a walk to the Nerd Corner, where we will talk about a lot of nerd stuff. Yeah.
My Nerd Corner here, particularly nerdy. As I have mentioned long ago, I have another podcast, and currently in that season we're going through The Rock's filmography. It's not great. The one standout movie in there, well, there's 1.5, but the one real standout movie is, of course, Southland Tales, which is a film that, funny, as horribly weird and awful as it is, premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. That director was riding high off of the Darnie Darko fame. It became this big cult hit. This movie had the big stars at the time, had The Rock, had Sarah Michelle Gellar, had Sean William Scott, and then a million SNL alum for some reason, and Justin Timberlake. And just this crazy movie, and premiered at Cannes, and nobody knew what to do with it, which is fair, because I don't know what to do with it. It's why I like it.
I have no idea what this film is. You've brought it up so many times.
I know, because there's no point describing it. You would just have to watch it. So nobody knew what to do with it for fair reasons. It's certainly not the crowd for that movie at that festival. But that cut then was re-edited to the theatrical release that I had gotten to see for the episode, and the Cannes version was never seen. Until this very day, Bob.
Like this day, the day of recording.
No, technically Tuesday.
Okay, fine.
On the 26th or whatever day it was of January, they have released on Blu-ray new special edition that not only includes the original cut, but also this long forgotten Cannes cut, and loads of bonus special features and whatever. So of course I will be purchasing that and watching it, and then doing that as another week, so I don't have to do San Andreas, Central Intelligence. I'd rather do Southland Tales 80 times than do any of those movies. So definitely,
you don't want to do Skyscraper?
Yeah, that one's coming up too. Can't wait. And it's just odd because ever since we did this episode, it feels like the news has been nonstop about this movie, probably because now it's in my mind. But for some reason now it's very culturally relevant again, where the director actually wants to recut it and to make it better. To which I say, no, you can't. You got lucky that your mess became as good as it is. It's a fragile house of cards, and if any one thing is taken out and it's not put in the right order, the whole thing falls apart. You can't do it.
Wait. If this guy is as bananas as I think he is, he cuts milliseconds. he does a reversal of what George Lucas has done with the Star Wars series. Yeah. And instead of adding a moment here, a moment there, he's going to just cut unseen moments. Just make it ever so slightly shorter in a number of places, and that's his cut.
For me, I've always described it as that scene in The Simpsons where Mr. Burns goes to the doctor, and the doctor's like, "You have every disease known to man," and the doctor's like, and Mr. Burns is like, "Wait, that's bad news." And the doctor says, "Well, ordinarily, but all of your diseases are in perfect balance. They can't get through the door at the same time because they're all blocking each other. We call it Three Stooges syndrome, and that's what this movie is. Everything is completely awful when you look at it by itself, but for some reason, they all just sort of balance together just the right way to make this extremely unique and odd experience where, you're sort of grateful that you don't understand and you're not trying to understand. So, Richard Kelly, don't touch your movie, but I am very eager to see what all these people at Cannes got to see and what confused them so much, though I think I have a good idea. So check that out. It's available everywhere now. Bob, what is your nerd corner?
My nerd corner is I was able to find. Let me preface. I've been watching a lot of these horror-related pieces of content on YouTube. I've told you about Crypt TV. I've told you about Dead Meat. In watching those and listening to the Dead Meat podcast, I did find myself wanting to go deeper and deeper into the practical effects and practical makeup effect circle, and I found this really great, I want to say hour and a half documentary on Greg Nicotero. It was originally released back in 2010 or so. It was around the time that, The Walking Dead had come out. At that point, Greg Nicotero's brand new shining jewel for him and his whole makeup and effect department that he runs out of LA. If you are a fan in any way, shape, or form of film and how they're able to not only get to these effects, but also how the business and the entire industry that he is a part of developed, I would say try to find this documentary on Greg Nicotero. I'm not going to say the name because if you find it and you look for it, good for you. I don't want it to get taken down because I don't know who has the rights on it. So rather than rat it out, go look up Greg Nicotero documentary. And I think you're going to find there are a lot of really cool gags and special effects and lines of thought for you to pick up on. So maybe you'll go and join me down this rabbit hole.
So definitely go check that out. Support Practical Effects when you can. As we wrap this podcast up, Bob, I would be remiss if we didn't thank, of course, Lev Van Rensselaer for minding those audio boards. And I would like to thank Bob for joining me this week, as he will each and every week this season. Bob, you got any plugs?
Yeah, absolutely. I have plugs. I was going to thank you first, but fuck you, I guess.
I don't need your thanks.
Oh, yeah. Eat me.
Keep them.
So, yeah, you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, and a slew of other places by my handle, BobScaryVOA. You can also find me on BobScaryVOA.com. Forgetting my own website, but I don't need to think about it too much because I'm always there in vocal form. You can find my commercial, promotion, narration, and character demos all right there. And you ought to hire me because, God damn, you listen to my voice this long and you don't want to hire me yet? Please. You can also pick up, my tabletop game over on Itch.io, where I have made for you a Super Sentai game that you can play. But it's definitely not Super Sentai. I didn't say that, Toei. It is inspired by Super Sentai. And there are a lot of other books that will be coming out down the line. Is there anything else I want to plug? Keep an eye and ear out for Tamashi. That is the documentary that we were talking about at the beginning of this episode. Skeyhill, did you somehow tape me in the middle of the night so that way I can plug you having feeding Bob his dreams, an experiment in feeding the beast?
What the hell are you talking about?
I'm tired, man. I'm just saying, here is a free, absurd art piece, candid film. I'm thinking 1970 exploitation film.
Okay, I am your host, Patrick Scale. You can find my features, documentaries, short films, video essays, behind-the-scenes footage, animations, and so much more at QuixoticUnited.com and social media, presumably with a similar-sounding name. Thank you all for listening. Bob, tell the audience who's afraid of Virginia Woolf.
Everyone is afraid of Virginia Woolf, but nobody's afraid of the big bad wolf.
Just like me.